Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Show Up with Camron Gran. I'm your host, Cameron Gran, and if it's been a minute, that's what happens when the 4th of July comes up. Everyone else is out there celebrating Independence Day, and I'm down here remembering that happens to also be my mother's birthday, and so R.I.P. my mother, who passed away. Just in case anybody didn't know that, I am currently trying to figure out my new setup. If you're watching this online, thank you for being here. It's on YouTube, Grand Central. Shameless plug. Who am I? I don't know. The thing I wanted to talk about today is something I should probably preface before, is just something that I'm going through. I wanted to share it because I feel like it's something I feel like is important for other people to realize. But again, as I say every episode, I'm not a therapist. I'm just somebody going on his own mental health journey, trying to share like tips and tricks along the way that you guys can take or leave, because it's really all up to us how we choose to, figure out what's best for us in our own mental health. The thing I will say is this probably will be another episode where I try to edit it as very little as possible, which has helped me if you guys have been listening, because it makes me more of aware when I say uhs and ers and stuff like that. So my hope is that I will eliminate that from my vocabulary, just because it makes life easier to edit if you're not always having to, stop every 2 seconds because you are afraid of eliminating a certain, trying to fill airspace word that people say a lot, like is the Valley Girl air filler, if you guys know that. I so love it. It's just like an airy, breezy, Kim Kardashian-y type way of going about your life. A little bit of a background about what like is. Obviously, we all have our own likes as well. That's a little wordplay for you. Today, I decided that I wanted to go over something that I realized as a person matters more and more to me. I'm not good at this, and what I mean by this is I know that I value it, but I am not good communicating it, and I'm trying to figure out better ways of communicating that I need this from people while also trying to also give it to people, because something that a lot of people forget when they're like obsessed with their own thoughts. When I go to somebody, because we've gone over the dear man skill, the dear man skill is not you telling your friends do this or like I'm gone. And if that's how you're approaching it, you're probably approaching the dear man skill wrong, because A, that's supposed to be for people that you're trying to keep in your life because you value them, and B, it can be scary to even confront somebody. And to me, the dear man skill, when I first started doing it, did feel like a confrontation. And if it feels that way for you guys, I am sorry, but the only way to dial down what things feel like confrontation, you have to have small little conversations that add up over time until you can do bigger confrontations with people. And for me, I don't know if I confront people more. I know that I just choose to actually enact my value more. So if I'm in a situation and I feel like I'm not being valued, before I would just stay in that place and not let it bother me. That's a lie. See, I lied to you guys, and I promised I wouldn't lie to you guys. What I meant by that is, before, when I was in those places, I would step out of myself so that I could be in places with people that were being happy. Because if I voiced to them the things that they were doing, the whole thing would be ruined, because the experience of being good for everyone was more important than my own experience. But, the key phrase in that sentence is everyone. And everyone doesn't exclude you, but amazingly, a lot of us seem to think it does. If you're in a room, everyone in that room, including yourself, should be happy. And if you're in a room sitting down with people that you care about and you're giving them the dear man skill, it's important to remember, this is what I'm asking for them, but it also might mean that you too need to change. And I hope that if anybody's diving into DBT or other mental health things, that you realize that you're changing, because I feel like we forget, because we're in it, that we're changing along the way. And I'm not the person I was when I started my DBT and mental health journey. I'm somebody completely different. and I'm not going to hold somebody to the same like state of being that they were when I first started working on the Dear Man skill with them. Because a key point that I have said about the Dear Man skill is after you have established basically the terms of what you need, the next thing you have to do is check in on it and make sure that each person is aware that you're doing something. And I don't personally feel like mental like shenanigans. Well, it's not shenanigans, but I mean, like, a lot of times we get wrapped up in our own conversations with ourselves that we think that we're doing things for other people when we're not. Just because you think of Bessie or like your friend Tommy down the road doesn't mean that Tommy or Bessie know that you've thought of them. Like, if you want to be like, oh, this is a way I can interact with them where my friend knows I'm thinking about them and can see that I care for them. Like, a way of doing that in this example would be to text them, or a voice memo is a thing for people like me who I can't read text. And I know that Gen Z and like younger generations are like, oh, if you do anything more than text me, that's a no-no. And I just envy those people, because the reason why I can't do that is because my family has trained me to see text the wrong way. I've tried to undo that, and usually what happens is I eventually become so confused that I don't know how to respond. And I know a lot of people either really care that you don't respond to them or don't care at all. But I am somebody who that's an issue for, because if I don't respond to you, my entire brain, anticipation anxiety, starts to go over all the different ways that you are on the other side of the phone being miserable because I haven't responded to your text message. Which is why if I can't say anything, I'll be like, I'll get back to you later, or I'll say okay. Because especially when people are giving details, like, hey, do you want to hang out? Okay. When? Like, I mean, yeah, like with that kind of thing, you want to make sure you include when, because saying okay might be like, do they really want to hang out with me? Oh gosh. What you're hearing right now is my mental tirade that is constantly filling my brain. And I feel like a lot of people do this, especially if anybody out there is watching Inside Out 2. Anxiety and a lot of big emotions are introduced. And when I saw that movie, I'm like, you know what? This might be the closest representation to what I feel in my own brain, because a lot of what you're shown in that movie reminds me of inner family therapy, which is when you name like an emotion like joy, which it seems on the nose, so I wouldn't name my happiness joy, but like it is very close to that, where you're like, oh, when I'm having this emotion, I call that it this, and the reason why I do that is because if I don't name it, I don't process I'm having it. And a lot of times if I'm not processing I'm having it, I feel like my emotions are outside my control. And speaking of Inside Out, if you're watching this, I am not ennui. I'm not bored. There's a lot of purple happening, which could be fear. And then indigo's also there. And indigo is ennui, or wee, like Joy says. Sorry, I'm nerding out with you guys right now, and I don't know if that's going to be appreciated or not. The thing that I've realized and about myself is when I include edits, I also edit my, like, I overthink things. And I am trying to speed up my brain, because one of the things I enjoy doing is improv. And improv is a way of making your brain train itself so you can come up with a solution faster. Now, is it always going to be the perfect solution? No. But is it a solution that can be turned into action? Yes. And so I'm good with like improv when it comes to like, oh, what next choice can I make? But I'm not good with like thinking along the lines of future plans, because the future is scary. The future makes me want to disappear. And how does all this relate back to the topic of today? That's a great question. Owning your stuff. That is the topic, and I'm very passionate about that, because what I realized more and more is the way my brain works, I am okay with the truth being laid out to me. Some people prefer to live in gray areas or prefer to jump Like, prefer to pretend that like a tornado swept up a relationship and then it no longer exists anymore. And then me, for example, I'm somebody who isn't afraid of hearing a rejection, which surprises me even as I'm saying it, because this is a realization. I would love it if people would just be honest with me and say, I don't want to be your friend anymore. And the reason I would love that is because the what if, are we or are we not, drives me up a wall. Like, weeks, months will go by and people will not reach out to me or talk to me, and I'll be in this limbo constantly thinking about them because I valued this time with somebody. And for me, the golden rule has always been a huge thing with me, and I was taught that young and it just kept with me. But like, if you treat others how you want to be treated, the hope is that they will return that back to you. And for me, I view that more in the lines of karma, which the golden rule and karma are not from the same like religious based thing. So again, this is how my brain works. Take it, leave it. You don't have to follow it. It's fine. But like, my hope is if I treat a friend how I wish they'd treat me, then I'll get that respect back. And so if somebody decides they don't want to be my friend anymore, I would sit down with somebody myself and say, hey, I don't want to be your friend anymore. And then I can go over that with you. Because here's the thing. If you say that outright, like that was very blunt. If you say it that bluntly, say, I have reasons and I can go over them with you, but I also don't want you to feel like I'm just rubbing it in your face that I don't want to be your friend anymore. What do you want? And before you answer, I always say before you answer, I just want you to think for yourself if you need to know the answer. Are you somebody who can just let this go, or will you constantly wonder about this because I didn't give you that closure of understanding? And maybe that's something that I need in my brain. Like, I just need an explanation. But that's kind of how I wish people reacted. I don't know if it's true, but a lot of people, no, it's not true, because if you watch Friends, this is literally one of the major jokes that happen on the show, which is the fact that ghosting is now a term we throw around these days when it comes to dating, because instead of like sitting down with somebody that you don't like anymore, and telling them that you don't want to see them anymore, they just disappear from your life and you never even have a way of communicating again. Whereas Friends, they didn't have a term for doing that, like no text, no any of that. You just pieced out the next day, which is kind of what Joey's shtick was on the entire like series. You love him, hate him. He's the lovable. The term is lovable, like idiot. That's what in comedy, that's what he's referred to as. All of 6 of the friends are basically like now the ideals for setting up a comedy between 6 people, which is why that formula has been repeated a lot. You guys probably didn't plan to go to a mental health podcast and learn a lot about Friends, so there you are. I will digress on that subject, though I could go on. But Phoebe, since we're here, is a great example of somebody who is honest because she wants people to be valued more than she cares about being awkward or saying something that might upset other people. I know that's something that I've always admired about Phoebe, is she'll say the uncomfortable thing that needs to be said, but in a way that's approachable, that doesn't feel like she's just trying to... You know, a lot of us who have had trauma feel like when we share trauma with people or give trauma as reasoning, we're weaponizing it, especially if people have said that to us in the past. And I can't control how somebody takes me sharing about what's happened to me. What I can do is try to reiterate, I'm not trying to get you to react one way or the other. I'm just trying to be honest and share with you what I care about, what I value, and owning your stuff is, I'm saying stuff because I'm on the radio, but it's the other, it's the stronger if you use the curse word, but I'm withholding right now. But I value that so much because to me, anything that you give comes back to you. I've always had that feeling. And so if I value somebody, I'd rather tell them I valued the amount of time we had together, so that way they know for themselves they didn't waste their time with me, and that we've just changed to the point where whatever we're giving each other is no longer working. And saying that to somebody, I don't think is a problem. I find that really beautiful, because life is all about change, and when you fight change, more mental health things seem to crop up. But I've realized the thing that you have to remember when change is happening is it's all about taking it as it is, rather than trying to focus on controlling it. Because we have no control. Control is an illusion, which is why no matter how much planning you can do, those plans can still go wrong. I will say knowledge is something that you can acquire to help lower like the effect of those random acts of like that can happen to you as you experience the world. Like for me, a goal I have, because I seem to constantly have this be my issue, is to work on financial like awareness. Not just the awareness of it, but also like how to budget, how to do these things more productively, so that way I'm not sitting here on the other end of a day really confused as to why everyone else can do things like budget for a trip, and I'm here always living paycheck to paycheck. Also, things add up over time, and like a quote that Tom Hiddleston said that I like saw from a short was that you live two lives, and I think he got this from a quote, but I heard it from him. Like we live two lives. One of them is a life that we live before we realize that our time here is short, and then the other life we live is when we truly embrace like how short we have on Earth. And I find that really beautiful in a way. And something that I always strive to do is just leave things more positive than where I came in. And also not to judge yourself, because there are things about me that I've been told is wrong, mostly because I don't engage in the world like other guys do. Like, as you can hear, I'm talking about a lot of like emotions and like mental health, and like that's a thing that's always been a taboo for, again, my generation. I don't know if that's different for younger people, but like we weren't allowed to share emotions, and even as a kid I had to share my emotions. I can't bottle it up, because if I bottle up, usually that's when things go really wrong for me. And then sometimes I ignore things to the point where they become real problems or worse problems, because I was afraid to just look at it. Like, anybody out there, if you're like avoiding something, just look at it for a minute, and then maybe the next day, if you can't actually dive into it, look at it for a couple more minutes, and then eventually, hopefully, over the course of a week, you'll build up enough like strength to actually face something. Because I fear the unknown, I fear change, and that's why one of my inner family people is named Susan, because she just is a stopper. She stops me from doing anything, because staying where I am keeps me safe, which is an illusion, because if that was true, I wouldn't constantly find myself in situations where I wind up on the verge of doing not the right thing for myself. And the thing that I love when it's owning your stuff is one of the key components of DBT. We all have good sides, we all have bad sides. And to bring it back to Inside Out 2, one of the things that they dive into is sense of self, beliefs that we have. And the ending of the movie, it's not really a spoiler because I'm not telling you how this comes about, but the ending of the movie is all about, we all have these different things that are good and bad. And if we fight those things, we actually do worse for ourselves rather than admit that we are flawed individuals who will not always make the perfect choice. All we can do is strive to make a better choice the next time that it's in front of us. I don't always understand social cues, and I don't understand them even more when I can't see people. Which is why when I'm talking to somebody on the phone and then all of a sudden they're upset, I try to have them stop and tell me what, like, I don't always know what happens in a conversation. I just know that the tone has shifted. And so sometimes I try to flash back and be like, okay, what is this? Why did this go wrong? And then I try to understand what I did, because I don't try to do things. They just happen. I mean, I'm doing things and I recognize that those things I'm doing are getting a reaction from people, but I don't hear it and I don't think things that make me feel like I would do something that would hurt somebody's feelings. But even though I do that, I'm owning the fact that I do that because it's a part of me. Like, it's not something I like. It's not something that I would like to keep, but I'm not going to like hate on myself because I do it, because that doesn't solve a problem. If anything, it makes the issue worse because it becomes an obsession. You're so afraid of doing this thing that it kind of stops you from doing anything, and then you're too afraid to talk to actually fix an issue because you're just avoiding anything that brings that issue up. Which is all to say that owning your stuff can be very scary, and it has been scary for me especially, because oftentimes I will allow people to treat me a certain way because of my fear of confrontation. And the thing that gave me the most relief when I started going to DBT and talking in therapy was when I would say, hey, you did this thing, or you allowed these people to do this thing to you because you were trying to survive. But trying to survive isn't good enough anymore. Next time something like this happens, call it out or figure out how to get yourself out of the situation sooner, because you didn't leave that situation, you stayed in it. And so you basically became... It's basically called disassociation. I disassociated because that was the only way I could get through a bad thing. And that's not ideal, because sometimes when you disassociate, things can happen that you don't want to happen, but you don't know how to remove yourself from a situation. Sorry. These are big topics that probably should dive further into my own therapy sessions with an actual therapist, but... The point I'm making is owning your stuff is so important. But do it without judgment. That was the point I was trying to drive home, is when I started to look at myself without judgment. The term "it is what it is" to me was explained with the impact of don't judge yourself for what you did. It is what it is. When this happens again, or when you think this way again, how can you change it? But just because you're aware that there are ways to maneuver a situation differently doesn't mean you'll do that the first time or the third time that it happens. What it means is, now we're developing an awareness, and we're aware of it so that we can strive to go around it. And the thing that I don't do, that I am struggling with people, is I don't tally. Like when I've dear manned with somebody, I don't they've done this one thing. The only time it bothers me is when it's not at all. But I don't be like, they did this for me this one time and then we did this more again. I don't believe in tallying. I shouldn't have to get on you to give me what you said that you wanted to like work on with me. Like you should have those moments and those conversations after you've had the sit down of and giving what you need from somebody. And then like the man part of Dear Man is being like, okay, and this is like the compromise of how I, your friend that you're expressing that you need something from, am going to give that back to you. So that's the man part. And so after that point is when you're like, okay, a month from now, let's just like check in with each other. Let's see if the things that you've tried, that you said you've tried, have come across at all. Because that's the key point of any relationship is communication. A lot of people seem to think that internal work is work. It is work for yourself when you're doing your own mental health. That is true. Your own mental health can happen within your own brain. But like relationships, you need to make sure that you're checking in. Especially because one brain does not work like another brain. We all think differently. We all have different values. We all have different beliefs. And sometimes we do things thinking that we'll get the same like result with the other person because we think the same way, and then that's not true at all. We don't think the same thing apparently. There are things that I think are funny that other people don't think are funny, and then some people like think that that's an issue. And that's actually one of the things that I love even about comedy is it's like, oh, I can say a joke and people will find it funny that think like me, and people that don't find it funny just don't like share those same types of like humor. And I think that's beautiful. Our differences are what make us unique, and our differences, I think, are what makes something beautiful, and why I think compromises are so important. Because those compromises you get from the Dear Man skill can actually lead to better relationships, because then, like, our lives change. We don't stay the same people over time. The person you were in college is not going to be the person you are once you've had a family. It's not true, and that expectation is crazy. Don't say the word crazy. Sorry. It's absurd. It's like thinking that you'll be the same person in 10 years' time is not accurate. However, the way to preserve relationships and to like remain friends with somebody is to like have check-in conversations and like ask about that person. And something that I'm working on is trying to figure out how to take people as they are. And what I mean by that is I value communication. And I really need that from people. And some people enjoy like communicating, some people hate it, and I'm trying to figure out how to basically approach friends who don't like communication in a way that I can still get what I need without forcing them to be different. Because I don't think it's like bad to not like to talk a lot. I think that we all value like that kind of talking differently. I am somebody who like I usually like latch on to people who love to talk about like the truth of where they are in a moment. I think that's so beautiful, and I think that telling me that you're miserable, I think is amazing. Telling me that you spent the day like, oh, I cooked food. Oh, I went on a walk. Like, oh, I watched television. We watched this show. I don't understand. And maybe it's because Viola Davis' speech when she won the Oscar for Fences meant something so much to me, because it's something that I also believe. Like every single person that you meet has a story to be told, no matter how drab or like boring they might perceive themselves. Like their experience on Earth matters. When she said that, she was talking about like if you look into a cemetery, if you exhume any of those bodies, their story deserves to be told. That's me paraphrasing. Did not quote Viola Davis correctly. I couldn't do what she said justice, but it was beautiful if you want to watch it when she won for her Fences. I believe it's Fences. I think she was also nominated for The Help, but I'm pretty sure she won for The Fences. But the thing that and maybe that is a point that I should make, is I am an actor. And what I love about acting and performing is it gives you the opportunity to stop thinking about you and to step into somebody else's shoes. And the thing I realized I was doing, which is the biggest problem, is I'm trying to take myself into another person. You can't like be like, oh, this is how I think. I'm gonna jump into your body and I'm gonna do like a little Freaky Friday with you, and we're gonna think the same way because now I'm inside that body. No, one thing that I love that I watched recently is Anya Taylor-Joy was talking about a character, and when she played that character, she's like, oh, no matter what she did, that this character was a good person, and she had that belief no matter what she was doing that entire movie that she was on. And then the second they wrapped the film and stopped, she was like, oh wow, now that I have shut that character down, I've stepped away from her, I'm like, oh yeah, she's a terrible person. And that's something that I find fascinating, especially when you're doing a dramatic villain type character, because it's not the same. I don't think it's the same when you're playing like a villain in a superhero movie or a cartoon or like something extremely dramatized, because usually like the more dramatic it is, the less attached to reality it is, and the more like enthralled or deep in reality you are, like the more like you have to bring yourself to believe something and just separate yourself entirely. Jennifer Lawrence had to do Mother, and she said that doing that film was so traumatic that she asked them to have a tent close to the set, so that way when she was done, she could go and watch the Kardashians and just turn her brain off afterwards, because that's how draining it was. I mean, I believe her because she broke her rib while like performing that movie, but like that's kind of the thing that I realized is anger for me, especially this example, is not something that comes naturally to me. It is something that I experience, which is why when I'm experiencing it, it's so foreign that I start to realize, oh, these are the symptoms of anger, and I don't know why I'm having that, especially because it's not something that I normally experience. Funnily enough, I don't experience anger a lot, but people perceive me as angry a bunch because my face rests in a way that seems to tell people that I'm extremely upset. My voice, and I do have a dry sense of humor. I'm not going to deny that I am very dry, but my voice can be very flat when I'm joking, and people then hear me say something and they think I'm being serious. The one person, loved her to death, was named Amy, and when we met in college, she had the dry sense of humor, and every time I spoke, she got that I was joking. And one time she leaned over to me and she was like, you know, if any of the teachers heard what you said in the back of this class, they would think that you're being a jerk, but I know that you're just joking, and it's hilarious to hear you narrate this class. And I'm like, thank you. Nobody else has really understood that I'm always joking when I speak like that. It's just so funny and, again, amazing to me that we can be in a room, especially in that case I was in a conservatory of actors, and we can all love something so much and just share in that moment together and just be so happy. And that's the one thing that, like, owning your stuff can also mean not allowing other people to tell you that you're not allowed to be happy, or you're not allowed to be doing what you thought you were doing in a moment. And I feel like the more I've worked on myself, the harder it has been for other people to gaslight me into not being where I'm at when I'm speaking with them. Because again, I can say things, and we can't control how other people perceive what we're saying. I don't think anybody's going to ever, like, you can try to say things in a better way next time, but I have no control over how you took something. I have my intent that I was trying to tell you, but if I communicated my like intent wrong, then I can own up to that, because that's can be an issue, and I don't think there's a problem with being misunderstood. The problem is when people don't want to hear you trying to communicate better. And that's kind of my thing is, if you're going to sit somebody down with Dear Man, if you're going to do like the step of relationships where you're trying to be better at it, like most of the times, like when I had struggled with people, it's because we have stopped communicating and we've both latched on to our own way of experiencing so hard that we can't hear the other person. And when you're at that point, you're never going to get to a compromise because you're just two heads butting. You need to actually be like, oh, let me listen, and then like open up, And then you can maybe communicate that way. Like if you don't open up, you're never going to hear somebody else. And hearing somebody else might mean you have to hear that you did something that you're not proud of. Or also sometimes I'm not sorry about what I said. And this is a problem is when I say this, people are like, oh, so you're not really apologizing, because it sounds like political speech where people are like, oh, I'm sorry you felt that way. And I've never meant it that way. But when you start speaking it, it does sound like you're just saying, oh, I'm sorry that that's how you took it, but that's not how I meant it. I said it in the way people think I'm meaning it, but that's not how I ever think about it in my head. Normally I'm like, oh, I never would have said it with the intention, with the like intent you perceived me for saying. That's why I'm sorry that I upset you. But like the reason I was trying to communicate that wasn't like I really wanted to either include you or I wanted to share in something with you. I wasn't trying to like upset you. Oh, see, it's hard to explain this because it's a concept that's very nuanced that you have to really like, I don't want to say be obsessed with the way that like communication and like how like thoughts are, like you have to really want to like dive into that to really get it, because it's like pencil thin from being like either too rude or like not hearing. It's like there's a middle path, and if you don't find the middle path, you're in the wrong or you're not even present, and it's kind of no way about it. And it always makes me laugh because I have found myself in those situations and I'm trying to like get info, because I'm like, most of the time when I'm in that like zone, I'm like, oh, we wound up here and I didn't know what I said that made us get here. But I'm not going to be like, oh, I don't deserve to be told that I did this to you. I didn't mean to do this to you. But let's figure out how this happened so I don't do it again. Which is why you have to, be careful, because communication requires two people. And it's hard to fix something when it's one-sided, which is why letting go has been easier. Most of the I'm going to say this, and I don't want this to be the case. So here's my hand. I'm going to knock on wood. Most of the times when I'm trying to like have a better relationship with those people before I can get to like a good relationship, but that doesn't require work at all, those people have passed away. I don't want that to always be the case. Like my mother's an addict, and she was doing things that were not good for me or for herself. But I also was trying not to judge her. I was just trying to be like, hey, you can't just assume we have a good relationship. I need us to work on this, and I need you to be like, where are we at? Because I don't want to just jump back into the phrase mom son, because like those words mean something to me. I don't think you should just throw those kind of words around, because when they're thrown around, I feel like they mean less and less. But like if somebody's your mother, like there's emotion behind that. There's a way of perceiving your mom. And if somebody throws around the word son, that should mean something too. Like, and so I'm like, if I'm your son, then I need you to treat me like that. You can't just like say that I'm your son and then treat me like crap. That's not okay. Like words matter. Like you can't call somebody your friend and then never interact with them. That's not friendship. That's just a word that you're using with somebody that's basically an acquaintance. Like for all intents and purposes, I could be somebody that you only ever see at the company barbecue. Like not somebody that you're friends with, but somebody you talk to because you talked to them before last time a company barbecue came up 4 years ago. And then they're like, oh, good. Somebody I talked to that last company barbecue, so I don't have to talk to all the rest of the people here. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, I love the scenario of like when people say like, oh, just imagine that there's a drop of water, and then it lands on a river that's smooth. It's not a moving river, and then like it ripples out, and then that first drop is the people that you care about most, and then as it ripples, those are like as the ripples go, the further out the ripple is, the less that person should be be valued to you, but not like they as humans value, but like how like you perceive your time with them, how much value you put on that, and own that too. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I approached this scenario with somebody that I'm really like barely a friends with, but not like for bad, like, but we're like, oh, we're casual friends. We're not like trying to be there in tough times type of friends. If I want a good time, I go to this friend and we go like canoeing or clubbing. I don't know who you are. I don't do any of those things. I don't know why I use them as examples. But like that's like you have like your hype friends. We're like, oh, all we do is hype each other up. We don't talk about serious things. And then there are people who are like that. They're like, we don't want to dive into conversations. We don't want to have that kind of relationship. And then you're like, okay, so you're further down the ripple. But I need more people on my inner circle. Like I appreciate your friendship, but I need to focus more time on finding people who can be in my inner circle, because I think that you should have personally, I think you should have at least 5 people in your inner circle. And then the other 5 people, because I think it's like 10 can be in your circle. I don't know how big your family is, but then like the other 5 is like family. And again, that's an expectation that I was told by a therapist who has a good relationship with their family. I don't have a good relationship with my family, and I own that. And because I own it, it's harder for that fact to make me upset. Because whenever I think about that, I have a flash of previous pain, because I've always really valued family. And I don't know how to be where I want with my family, because whenever I try engaging with them and whenever I try to be better with them, it's kind of like a deer in headlights. We're like, my family is like, oh, we're gonna like we see the deer, and we might stop or we might run it over, but we don't care about the deer once it's like out of our path. That's so dark. I'm so sorry. That was a bad example. I'm not going to edit it out, but I just meant like they steamroll me. But it's just like, I'm sorry. It's like it's just one of those things where I'm like, sometimes they want to take time to like see me and be like, hey dearie, like you gotta get off the road, we're trying to drive past. And then sometimes they're like, we're gonna get out of the car and make sure the deer is good, but we're still gonna leave it on the side of the road, but we're gonna get out just to check in on it. But we're not gonna be like those weird people who like throw the deer inside the truck and take it home to be our pet. What is this example? I don't know where it came from, and I'm not going to continue with it because it makes me laugh. But I guess the point I'm making is value your time, own up to who you are, because I'm 28, and I feel like I now know who I am more, but I also know that the things I value have changed, but the habits I have are against my values. And I need to change my habits, because they are the things, if I keep doing them, only bad things will come. And that sounds like doomsday thinking. And I don't think it's doomsday. Just that stuff started to happen that are like, oh, if I don't start changing, you will get the result that you've been dreading for a very long time. And that's not a result of, magic. It's like you were like, oh, well, it won't happen. It's not happening now, so it's never going to happen. No. If you ignore something long enough, then the thing that you're dreading will happen. I have what's called distress avoidance, and that's something I'm trying to make the habit of stopping. Stop it, because distress avoidance, for any of you guys who don't know what that is, it's when something bad happens and you have two solutions that you can do. You have the immediate thing that makes you feel better, makes you like sleep that night, and then you're like, oh, I can sleep tonight with a big warm cup, just one cup of hot cocoa. And like I'll feel tucked in. But the next day, when the sun rises, everything's gonna hit the fan. But today, I had that cocoa. Well, if you just did the harder thing, the thing that you're dreading, and then you do the small little steps that over time make bigger changes, but we're too afraid of that like small little step or that big change to happen, so we do the wrong thing. That's something that I'm trying to make my habit. I'm like, oh, I keep dipping my toes into like the hot cocoa pool. I need to like get rid of the hot cocoa. Don't even like chocolate. Why am I drinking hot cocoa? I don't know how to answer that question because it is like a fallacy that I probably should be like, oop, hot cocoa. Throw that out. No, what you got to do, again, I am such, a source that you should believe 100%, is what you need to do is just be like, hey, thank you for coming. It's time that you exit the door. We don't need you anymore. Get out of here. Get out. Now, if you come back, that's fine. But we don't need you here 24/7. So like one of the scenarios that they bring up to you when you first start DBT is like the bus driver. Who's on the bus? Like what kind of like emotional things do you carry with you all the time? Or what kind of states of being do you carry with you all the time? And then who drives the bus? What's the one thing for you that if it leaves the bus crashes? And I was surprised that the thing that I can't let leave my bus is the thing everybody else says can go. They're like, oh, well, you have to be practical. You have to think realistically. And the thing that I need to drive my bus is the dreamer. I have to dream and I have to believe in these big things. Otherwise, I freeze, the bus stops. Hopefully, it's not like the Fantastic Four and the bus isn't like teetering over a bridge about to collapse. But I haven't, tried to get out of the bus. I'm just stopped. Like, hopefully it's not that kind of scenario, but it's like one of those things where like, oh, so I need the dreamer and I need it to be here. How can I restructure my life so that I can open the bus and I can let other people on, but still let the dreamer lead? And that's important for me, but also, since we're on this topic, owning something that is a problem for me. Thoughts. I think too much, and my thinking it usually lands me into problems. And so something that I've been trying to do is I am developing a system where I do certain things without thinking. They're what I call, like, you don't think, they're unthinkers, unthinkables. Like, that sounds like a bad thing. But it's basically, like, you do these things and we don't question it. Like, other things we can question, other activities we can, have in this world and, or we can leave them. But these certain things we do no matter what. You don't get to think about them, you just do them. And for any of you out there who has ever been taught discipline, maybe that would be a better term to call it. But I can't think of that word because, I'm great with the English. Did I tell you? Because if I think about discipline, it comes up with negative connotations that don't equal out. Mostly because I failed at discipline for so long that it feels like just setting myself up for failure. But also when discipline has been brought up to me, it's been weaponized. And so I'm like, oh, you're going to threaten me with this? Well, I'm going to be the most lazy person who procrastinates to the last second. Even though I say I care about all this stuff, I'm not going to be disciplined. I'm not going to get that done. I'm going to get it done right before the deadline. I mean, it's going to be the best 2-hour written essay you've ever read, but it's going to be done in 2 hours before, midnight hits on that day of the assignment, but it's going to get done. You better believe it. This episode, I had a week to do this. I got done with my schoolwork on Monday. I could have done this Monday through Sunday. I'm doing this episode right before I go to sleep on Sunday night, and it's coming out tomorrow. Does that sound smart to you? No, it's not smart. I mean, it's getting done because I've developed the discipline to actually post more frequently because that's a big goal for mine. But it's like the small little steps are getting me to a better course of like interaction with you guys. And I'm hoping to be better at this because I'm just trying to make it so if somebody else is out there who is by themselves, like the problem I had when I was going through mental health things was I did have friends and I did have family, but when I was at the worst moment of my life, both of those things were taken away from me because of like things outside of my control. I mean, they were in my control, but like I didn't have DBT and I didn't know how to deal with my emotions to know how to navigate that. So it felt like I had no control. And then I did try doing the thing people were saying, like, well, if you're like, because therapists always tell you that if you're struggling to try calling your family and your friends and tell them what's going on. And then that's why when I found out in DBT that the crisis line is something that you can call at any time, no like pressure. It's just something that like you can call and they'll give you resources in your local area to help you through whatever you are going through. And that is so vitally important to share because a lot of people that I talked to in the program didn't even know that that was a thing. And most people think that you can't call until it's the day of. That's not true. I've said this before in the podcast, and I probably will repeat this many times after this. But that's the number one like falsehood that's out there that I want to change for people, because I think everyone matters, and I only hope that you guys will also start believing in that yourself. And a lot of changes are happening for me, some good, some bad, but my hope is that by sticking to these things that I'm owning up to now, that I'm developing discipline for, I can become a better version of myself. I am currently in the works of figuring out what things from my previous life with a family that hasn't talked to me in basically 10 years I need to keep, and what things of that time I just need to finally let go and never think of again. But that's for me to decide, just like it's for you guys to decide for yourself what values or what teachings that you were taught as a child need to stay. And even if you happen to be a child, I think questioning thoughts is the biggest thing I could tell you. Is like, just because you think it doesn't make it real. And that's another thing that can be scary, is you're like, my thought like became this bad thing, and because I thought this, I must be a terrible person. And that comes from judgment. It is what it is all about just being like, oh, I had this thought. Okay, that can happen, but that doesn't mean I have to keep it. That doesn't mean I have to like be sad. It doesn't mean I have to be miserable. It just means that the thought came to me, and now I'm gonna let it go. It's like, a breeze in the air. It doesn't get to stay here. It can go, and that's kind of what I've learned about owning your stuff. Is it's like, when you own it, when you can see it without judgment, you can. I want to say embrace it. Because when you embrace those parts of yourselves, I feel like you have so much power over yourself. And the more power you have over yourself, the more you're able to see truth beyond falsehoods. Because people are afraid of telling the truth. I value the truth so much, it's very hard for me to lie to people. If I lied to you, it's probably because I over the course of my entire life, I've been trained 1,000 times by people to say the same thing if somebody ever asks you that question. Because the joke is, oh, do I look bad in this dress? Always lie and say you look good. I probably would lie in that scenario because I've been told to always say you look good in that scenario. Now, if I said, do you want me to actually... Oh, this sounds so bad. If somebody was like, be honest with me, and I'm like, are you sure? And I'd have to check in. If they were like, oh, see, that's the issue, is that they're like, yes, I want the honest answer. I would give the honest answer. And I'm sitting here and be like, but no, they say always lie. But after that question has been asked and then answered, I would have to give you the truth. That's just how my brain works. It's like I can't lie, which is funny because I love acting. But the reason why I love acting is because I'm not lying, the character is lying. So it's like a little workaround for my brain so it doesn't feel like me, the individual, Cameron, is lying. And a lot of times when you're acting on camera, you're supposed to act as though a lie is a truth, because when you act out a lie, usually it's bad acting. People like I'm like, I didn't do that. Eye movements and things that are like tics. Sometimes it's done really well, but it's just one of those things where like you know yourself more, and then it can't be used against you, kind of thing. And that's kind of the thing I always try to teach people. And that's kind of where I'm going to end this episode today, is just like, remember just to own who you are today. Remember to be kind to yourself in thoughts of tomorrow. And if you have things in your past that are haunting you, maybe sit down for a little bit and just ask why it's haunting you. And then figure out if it's something that you can actually change, or if it's something that happened and the only way that you can make up for it is just by being better from today on. Because a lot of times we get stuck in these scenarios that we're never going to return to, when all we can control is this moment. And so when we own our stuff, we don't have to like the concern of all these extra things. We're just like, okay, this is what I meant. It was miscommunicated. How can I fix this in the future? Okay, I do have this thing, and I will admit to that. But if I know that I wasn't doing what they're saying, and I don't see how they can have perceived it another way, then I'll maybe, okay, this I'll give you guys the truth here. If I'm angry with you, because I told you guys I'm slow with anger, if I hear you say something and I will ask you, you said this, I took it as this. Did you mean it this way? I am somebody who will say that before I get angry, because there's always a chance I misheard you. But if you say yes, then I'm like, okay, so now I know they meant it this bad way, and now we're gonna have a problem. But I've always been that way. And that's always, and I love being that way because it means that I'm not listening to the voices in my head. I'm listening to the person in front of me be honest with me. And if more people were honest, the world would be a better place, because we would have less miscommunication. Wow, my mouth's dry. And I feel like honesty may not be always the best policy, but it makes it easier for us to know where we stand with another individual. That way we know who we need to look out for and who we need to like have a little closer on our inner circle. So that's it for this episode. Thank you guys for watching. If you're listening to this on the radio, thank you for listening, or a podcast. Reviews help me spread this to more people. I really do appreciate them. And make sure, as always, if you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It helps us spread this to more people. And to wrap this up, I'm going to end this video as I always do and remind you guys, please show up for yourself. Because the most important thing you could do today is remember that you matter. Thank you. Bye-bye.